Hello and welcome back to Automation. Today I'm going to tell you everything that I know and that you need to know about the new Automation beta. I'm going to tell you how to access the beta and also everything that you need to know to make the best car you possibly can. I'm going to have on screen as well as in the description timestamps to each section of the video. So we're going to be going over a list of things. We're going to be going over all the changes made to the suspension tuning. We're going to be going over the changes to the engine, which is quite a lot of changes to the engine. We're going to be going over the drivetrain. We're going to be going over the exporter, fixture changes, like designer changes, and all that jazz. To access the open beta, all you need to do is go into your Steam library, right-click on Automation, click on Properties, go into Betas, and here you'll have a drop-down menu to select the Open Beta Ellisbury Update Open Beta. So just simply click on that, close it, and then your game should start updating. I've already done so, so it is not. Starting off with the heart of the update, the engine designer, we are going to be going over every change that I have discovered as well as I've been told. Everything that you need to know should be covered, not in detail, but at least fundamentally should be covered. So no new engine configurations, still just the usual, but we do have new engine blocks. They are all the same for each engine, so for each engine you'll be able to get cast iron, aluminium heavy, aluminium light, aluminium billet, aluminium silicon heavy, ALSI light, and magnesium. No changes to the head material, and no changes to the head and valves. So the differences between these new aluminiums and aluminium silicons compared to the old ones are that you can now tune, well, sort of tune, you can now decide what sort of aluminium you want for what sort of engine you're making. So if you're making a torquey engine, you probably want to go for aluminium heavy, which has worse cooling than the light aluminium and the aluminium billet, but it has better power density and better smoothness and noise dampening than the light aluminium. And then billet aluminium is better than both of them combined for both purposes, and has better cooling and better emissions than the other two. As well as it has the best power density. So you might be asking, what is power density? Well, they added a new form of reliability, which is power density. Basically, your engine block determines how much power you can make before you risk excessive wear to the engine. It doesn't affect your peak RPM that your components can survive, and it doesn't affect the torque reliability either. And from what I can tell, your engine components, your internals, do not affect it either. So, because I can go from this forged steel crank to just all cast iron components, and the power density... Oh no, the power density does change. I believe that might just be from the crankshaft though. So if I go to billet steel heavy... No, it does change depending on what all your components are, not just the crankshaft. This is correct. However, what I neglect to mention is the fact it bases the power density off of your weakest link. In this case, that is the piston heads. Another thing they've changed is that before, your crankshaft and your conrods and pistons, they weren't really connected. But now, depending on how heavy your pistons are, will determine how fast your conrods and your crankshaft are able to go, as well as the torque demand they can survive. So as you can see, this number, well, that number doesn't change apparently, so it doesn't affect torque, just RPM. But as you can see here, that's at 10,000, but if I go back to the cast light, it is at 9,000, as well as you saw a slight difference. I believe that was a 300 before, now it's at 100 for the crankshaft. So if I go forged light pistons, 10,300 and 11,500, and if I go titanium conrods, 14,600. So it makes a big difference. Obviously, this is exacerbated by the fact that this is like one of the worst con rods you can pick, and this is literally the best one you can pick. But yeah, it does make a big difference depending on what internals you have connected together. Speaking of said internals, we have more options, more variety to get more realistic builds. We have different weights of them, nothing new, just different weight classes of them. So we have the same old cast iron that we had before, but we also have a lighter version which provides higher RPM but sacrificing max torque, and then we have the heavy versions which provide better torque capacity but sacrifice max RPM. And so for conrods we have cast and light and heavy, and we also have the forged light and heavy. Titanium is just titanium. For the crankshaft, as you can see, they would have to put in a slider if they wanted to fit everything in for flat planes. As such, they added a button to switch between crossplane and flat plane, but only on V8s, so on everything else it is just grayed out. But yeah, so we don't have a light option for the crankshaft in terms of cast iron, but we do have a heavy version, and then forged steel has a light and heavy version. Billet steel, however, only has a heavy version. And then as for the pistons, we have the light and the heavy versions of both cast and forged, but no regular forged, which is fine, I guess, because we have these two versions of cast here, which I believe low friction cast used to be a lot worse, because I believe the torque demand was better than... Oh, wait, no, sorry. This is the old cast. The torque demand was either worse or the same as the regular cast, but the RPM was worse, I believe. So I do think they have been adjusted. And if you remember from last update, the emission slider used to go green the further along it was, which was not the case because that would make your car emit more harmful gases. They only just fixed that in this latest patch. They didn't even fix it when they released this beta, which is odd. But yes, so we now can tell properly that, oh, well, I was going to say, we can tell properly that the best option for emissions is low friction cast, but that is quite obviously forged light, which I'm guessing is... I honestly don't know why it produces less emissions. Maybe it is still backwards, I honestly don't remember. And balancing mass is still the same. The top end is still the same, no new options in here. Turbos are all the same. And now, a bit of a gripe I have. I don't know if gripe's the right word, to be honest. It just seems correct. That's because it is. But I watched a video recently. I'll link it down below because it will explain it way better than I can. Carburation on a inline 5 is just not really possible. I'm going to save you from my 2-minute long pedantic rant. Just go watch this video right here, made by Driving for Answers. He explains it way better than I do. Like, I can't explain things. Rant over. Let's go back to multi-point injection and a standard mid-header. We also have the option to now change the emissions optimization level. So if we go into the new car emissions tab, we can see we have these 4 graphs here. This tells us our air-fuel ratio. This tells us our emissions of carbon monoxide. Didn't remember what it was for a moment. This tells us our hydrocarbons, and this tells us our nitrogen oxide. How to read these graphs is these red dots are the current testing cycle we have selected. Before we continue down this web of lies, some of this information is incorrect. It will be properly explained later on. I can't properly edit around it, sadly, so just take some of the information with a grain of salt until I correct it in a moment. There are multiple different testing cycles that you can select in the game, and you can even select them and see them inside of the testing tab, where it will show the up-to-date temperature of your catalytic converter, as well as how efficient it is running during the test. And there's no way to speed this up, so if you want to sit through for half an hour, go ahead. But yeah, so they drive the cars in the emissions testing, and so you can see the speed as well as the gear they're in, and the RPM and throttle that they are at for the testing. You can also view that... No, not in here. You can also view that in the fuel efficiency map. You can see where they jump to. It's supposed to be the ones in red is what the current cycle you've selected is. For some reason that stopped working in between the original launch of this update and the first patch. So if I select a different one here, it doesn't show a change. Normally the red ones are where the current test cycle you've selected will run. And as you can see, we get given a emissions standard rating. So this is WES 8. And as you can see here, in 2020, Gasmia, Fruinia, and Hetvesia all want WES 11. If we go over to statistics and then go into detailed stats and fuel economy, you can see the standard of the years. And as you can see, we currently only meet 1997 standards, most likely because we produce far too much hydrocarbons and far too much nitrogen oxides. And as you can see, for 2009, we would fail 500% of the time, meaning we fail 5 times per test, which is impressive. If we go to leaded, it's only 700%. I was highly expecting more than that, and we slightly pass. We have a small % chance of failing the 1997 tests. How? What? Let's see here. We can choose it ourselves. Huh. Apparently they don't care about lead in the air. Okay then. And so you're still wondering, because I haven't explained it yet, because I'm a silly, what does this slider do? Well, let's click it and find out. We'll go up to 4, and as you'll see here, this changes our air-fuel ratio. And as you can see here, this is the line where we have optimized for the emissions testing. So if we increase this to 7, we'll just mark here as where it was. As you can see, it moves further out. Oh, okay, I'm a silly. I've done a big silly. This is the correction I was referring to. These red bits are where you are producing too much of a certain emission type, and not, in fact, where the test runs. So that is useful information to know. So yeah, as you can see, we have drastically changed our air-fuel ratio. I don't know if it's adding more fuel or adding more air, so I don't know if it's 14.7 air to 1 fuel, or if it's 14.7 fuel to 1 air. I believe it's the first way around, because the other way around just doesn't make sense to me. Yeah, so if we run this emissions test again, we should see a lot lower value. Apparently they're just... okay. Looks like I'm wrong again. This is where they test. They've just decided that they're only testing here now. So we can very much dieselgate this, apparently. So what I said before retconning it for a second time is in fact correct. The red bit is where we're failing. The grayed out bits are where the test is run as well, but we're not failing it. So for whatever reason, the game just really bugged out here and decided to condense it all into that one small area. But yes, it is red that fails. If we go back over here, as you can see, we pass the emissions with a 200% rating. There's no given explanation. Eh? What? So apparently our car is so clean it doesn't produce any sort of emissions whatsoever. It also doesn't use any, it either doesn't use any fuel or it uses all the fuel. Because we've got a fuel economy of nothing. So they've still got a lot to go with this, but it's a very good start. Continuing with the emissions, we also have our final options for the engine. We have the option to add a pre-cat, which is basically just a smaller catalytic converter before your catalytic converter. I believe it might be somewhere in this bit here for the header, which will reduce the amount of pollutant inside of your exhaust gases before going on to the other catalytic converter, which is a bit bigger, a bit beefier, but takes longer to heat up and therefore reach peak efficiency. So a pre-cat will help with that. And as you can see, it's back again. It's working again. So I'm assuming we actually use fuel. So it's a bit finicky to deal with. But now we can see we passed the 2009 standard with 119.4% pass rate. So it's not difficult to meet the standards, but it can be a bit challenging if you want to make a more experimental engine, like a 0.5 liter inline 3. Ask me how I know. And yeah, that is it for engine stuff. Now for the gearbox section of this video. We have a lot more drive types, having all-wheel drive with a viscous center diff, all-wheel drive with a helical geared center diff, and all-wheel drive with a clutched center diff. It used to be called all-wheel drive clutched, but it's now all-wheel drive on demand, which is a more accurate way of describing it. Where you'll have the two main driving tires, so either the front wheels or the rear wheels. I believe in this case it's probably going to be the rear wheels, although it might be the front wheels. You'd have to ask a dev, because I don't believe there's a way of testing it. We will try and figure that out though. But then you also have all-wheel drive advanced, which is probably just electric LSD, electric center diff. And then as for differentials, just regular differentials for either the front or rear wheels, we have a new option called clutched race LSD. And so I believe all this does is it acts as a clutched LSD, but you can actually customize it in Beam. So it's just the race LSD option that you could select before, but now you can export it just as the race LSD. They've also brought back 8 speeds for the dual clutch transmission, which is very nice, and they have brought back the sequential gearbox as well, and they have added CVTs, which probably one of my favorite gearbox setups. But for now, we'll go over the details in Beam in a moment, but for now we're just going to continue going over the rest of the new things that you can do with gearboxes. So you are able to, with CVTs, you can choose what is the maximum speed the gearbox can reach. Obviously, you are limited by the amount of torque or horsepower you have, as well as your wind resistance and drag. Basically, the force of air going against your vehicle, as well as the force, basically friction between your wheels and the ground, will of course reduce the amount of power that you're able to use. Also with CVTs, you have the option to change at what speed you are able to reach the rev limiter. So the minimum, at least in this configuration that we have at the moment, is 32 kilometers an hour. So if you're flooring it, once you hit 32 kilometers an hour, is when you'll be able to have your peak power. You also have the option to add in a speed limiter. So if I put that at 163, you'll see this go down to here. We don't use speed limiters around here. And then for your more standard gearboxes, you have the option to change the gear spread, which just chooses how close together these two ends are, or how far away they are from each other. And so this allows you to fine-tune what you want to prioritize more, which is either more acceleration at the low end or more fuel efficiency at the high end. as well as you can change the top speed of your final gear, which is determined by your differential ratio, as well as you can fine-tune how fast your first gear will go. And that further helps you tune your acceleration by adjusting these gears accordingly to your final drive, to your first gear. So if we make these really tight, and then, yeah, like your second gear in this configuration is, well, it doesn't do anything. You've got to go from first into third, pretty much. So this configuration is not optimal in any situation, really. We also have the option to completely customize these ratios ourselves. If we click on this wrench here, which is not available for CVTs because obviously, but with this we have the option to tune how long each individual gear is. So we can make the top speed of this gear, you know, nearly 900 kilometers an hour. We're not going to reach that, but we also have the option to view that as a gear ratio as well. So we can view that as a 0.20 to 1 gear ratio. So for every 5 spins of the wheel, you'll have 1 spin of the engine, which is quite a lot, because if you think about it, your engine revs, usually most engines idle around 1000 RPM. So for every 1 of those, your wheel spins 5 times. Yeah, that's a lot. But we also get given the option to change our final drive, so we can do something a little bit funky. Yeah, our final gear can reach upwards of just a casual, not, it says 900, yeah, just a casual 20,000 kilometers an hour. And yes, that scales with engine RPM as well. So have fun with that. And now onto bodies. There is quite a lot of new bodies, one of which being this body here, which we will be using in today's video for testing purposes. It is a 50s sports car, and it's quite the interesting one. I do like the look of it. With how thin that front is, it's probably going to be potentially a bit difficult to get headlights to work the way we're going to want it to without them clipping too much into the wheel well. That's just something that we're going to have to figure out and deal with. But yeah, so there is quite a lot of bodies. Most of them are just variants. As you can see, this body has quite a lot of variants, but there's a couple new 80s, 90s bodies. I believe there's a 60s body as well, maybe? Yeah, I'm not going to go over them because there's just too many. As well as, you'll see this says DLC. There's a bit of mixed information when it comes to that. So these are legacy bodies, as you can see by the fact it says mod name legacy car bodies. I believe what they're going to do, like this is my personal opinion of what they're going to do, is they're going to make the legacy car bodies pack a free DLC so that it's not in the mod workshop on Steam. Other people are saying it's a bug with the V16 DLC, where if you own it and also have the car legacy bodies installed, it will show as DLC, and other people are saying that they're hoping that they're not going to charge money for bodies that most of the time don't actually work. So people are thinking that they're going to charge money for it. To clarify what I mean here, I mean the legacy car body pack. I don't mean any of the other base game bodies. Some of them do sometimes not work, like the last update was the Countach body just didn't work. But yes, for the most part, all bodies do work, just not sometimes the legacy bodies. Yeah, so a lot of theories going around on what this all means. My hope is it is just the free DLC for the legacy car bodies rather than having them on the workshop, just because it is such a large file. Hopefully this does not mean we'll have paid car body packs in the future, because if that happens, I'd say it's gonna be all downhill from there. But yeah, that's it for the car body section. On to the fixture and exporter section now. Starting off, the best feature of this update, in my personal opinion, they removed the green dot. It's like, what does the green dot do? Well, you see this yellow dot here, that changes it between morphing and movement. The green dot, all it did is it did the same thing as the deselect button. That was it. Literally the most useless feature in the game, they've now removed it. Which is just certified PogChamp moment. Another change have been made to the fixtures with the export cameras. They are now actual cameras, and as you can see in the bottom right here, we have a preview of what it will look like in beamng.drive, which is really useful because we can now move this around and get an accurate look of how it will be in beamng without having to export it and mess around. Another change made to the Fixtures tab is we now have the option to view things even larger than before. One of the issues is, though, despite it being bigger, the preview window that we get is still the same size, I believe. So that is a 5x4, whereas if we go down, it is still 5x4. Arguably, they could definitely make it bigger if we have this WI size selected. Hopefully they will listen to this and add that in. I don't think it would be too difficult to do so. I am not yet certified as a programmer, so I don't entirely know how difficult it would be, but I wouldn't believe it would be too hard. Another excellent change that we have is we can now search for fixtures as well. So if I search beverage, if I spelled it correctly, yes, we now get all of these inside of this sponsors mod made by Cyborg Sylvia, meaning that it does add an extra step when you're making a mod in terms of you have to name each individual fixture, but your mods will certainly be improved vastly by it. We also have the option to only search in the current category being MISC fixtures. So if I search exhaust, obviously we're not going to get anything in MISC fixtures. We will get it in exhaust tips as well as in 3D, because there's this funky looking thing here. That's interesting. And then I believe Prey body molding, yeah. So really useful. If we turn that off, we can see everywhere where there's exhaust, which seems to be quite a lot of places actually. But yeah, overall, this is definitely a must-needed feature. Another thing they've changed in the fixture tab is in the advanced trim aesthetic settings. We can now turn off and turn on again different parts of the engine. So we can have no timing cover, no head, no forced induction, not that this has it anyway, and no intake if we really wanted to, as well as all these other options that you can see on screen here. What I'd like them to add potentially is a simplified engine mode, sort of like the use basic chassis option, where what it does is it keeps the outside all the same, but on the inside it's all solid, so there's no detail. That would vastly improve try count, especially when exporting into beamng.drive, and it means that we don't have to remove it in Blender ourselves, as well as it will improve performance. It does, however, mean a lot more modeling, which I don't think will happen, but it is something that they could look into if they want to. Another change that they've made is to fixture favorites. You now have to click this button here, which will open all the categories. I don't know how you favorite a fixture. I mean, clearly there is some way of doing it. I just don't know how. It's not by shift clicking. It's not anywhere down here from what I can tell. Here we are. You click this plus button here and it says add new favorite from current fixture. There also appears to be some other options down here which I don't believe were accessible before because they weren't there. There is edit paint for all material slots, which is amazing, and I probably won't be using it, to be honest, because I'll forget about it, but really useful. And then advanced fixture controls, which has reset fixture paint slots to default materials, that's useful without having to individually click them all. Remove all missing fixtures, and remove all fixtures. Something tells me this button here won't be used all too often, but this one is definitely useful, especially when updating versions, or if you're removing mods from your mod folder, as it means you don't have to go through the entire car just to find what's missing and remove it. You can just click this button here, and it will delete them all for you. There is also overwrite existing favorite, so I'm guessing it saves the color preset as well that you had, as well as delete favorite and revert fixed back to favorite. I believe they mean to put revert fixture back to favorite, because revert fixed back to favorite does not make sense. So I personally have never used favorite fixtures before, but I know Philman has, and he said on stream that he won't be using it anymore because he has to click this extra button here. To me, that seems a bit petty potentially, but I don't use the feature, so I don't have any comments about it. Another change made to car designing is with the paints. They have added new paints, such as, but not limited to, custom images. That's right, you can now grab any image off the internet and put it on your car by using these 3 options here. This is extremely useful for making custom badges without having to go through all the pain and effort of going through Unreal Engine, which is a lot of pain and effort. Not really effort, but most certainly pain. So you can go in here, click select image, and add new image file, open it, and now, as we can see, the car is now my logo, or at least my old logo. If you have too many of these, it will cause it to just export as no texture. At least that's what I've experienced, and that's what's been reported on the official Automation Discord. But it could also be a fact of I didn't add a mask or a normal, but from what I've been told, you don't need to do that, at least for just doing a livery like this. When doing a badge, you will need a mask just to cut out any of the corners, because it will be a square. So if you're making like a Ford badge, you will need a white oval covering the Ford badge area, and then the rest of it will be black, and that way it will export with only the Ford badge and none of anything else. And then the normal map is simply just used to add detail, such as with this badge here. The normal map allows it to have a sort of 3D-ness to it. Obviously, as you can see here, it is just flat, but with the normal map, it looks like these letters are actually sticking out from the black background. With the new update also comes updates to the exporter itself. In this menu, we have the option to collapse livery, which means basically any of your patchwork that you've put down will all be merged into one fixture, or one material rather, as it says here, for the exporter. As this says, it will result in better performance, but it will be a lower resolution as it needs to be able to fit all the detail on the entire car, as opposed to having all the detail for just each individual section of the car per fixture. So really useful for, say, racing events like the Building races. Anyone who has a complex livery, cough cough Salvatore Leone, cough cough, will be able to not lag out everyone's game. We also have the option to zip pack mod still, but we have 2 new options here. Weld breakable fixtures, which pretty much does as it says, it welds the fixtures to the car, so they're unbreakable, but they are all still individual, whereas merge all fixtures makes all the fixtures one fixture, as it would suggest, but still doesn't make them unbreakable. So if we have weld breakable fixtures off and merge all fixtures on, theoretically, if we get into a crash, our entire interior, if we had one, would come out all in one piece. We will be testing this alongside all of the suspension, but these segments will be split up into their respective parts. And here we are in beamng.drive to test out the new exporter. Here we have the Stone Spades. Wait, that's just the name. That's the entire name. It's basically the high ace, hence why it's called the Stone Spades. Yeah, so we've got a lineup of 4 of them. Do note that when exporting, I forgot to actually load into the engine since going into the new beta, so they're only drivable in EV form at the moment. So starting up, we just have the regular version with neither merge fixtures or weld fixtures enabled. Then we have, I believe it's weld, and then I believe it's merge, and then we have both enabled, all color-coded so that we can tell the difference. First though, we are going to show off another change with the exporter, not photo mode, environment. If we change this to nighttime, as you can see, they added in the tail light emitters again, which is very cool to see. As you can see, I only made the the high center light a brake light, but if I turn on the tail lights, you can see that the emitters all work, which is very nice to see. But we shall change it back to noon, as it just looks better than nighttime and will run better mainly. For our testing, we are going to be going over one of the suspension things. Now, these fixtures are in there strong. Let's instead of trying one of these, let's try crashing into the drag strip wall over here. Hopefully a high-speed wall collision will cause it. I say high speed in this thing anyway. No, those fixtures are in there strong, apparently. Let's try it with this one and see if it makes a difference. Well, in fact, no, what we'll do, we'll go back to here, and we'll just see if we can rip it off. We can rip them off. See, that's what I thought would happen. Obviously, those are imprinted into the body. Any of the ones that are conforming to the body just aren't able to be ripped off. That includes the wipers, apparently. And none of the interior appears to have its own nodes, which is interesting. It all seems to be separate from the rest of the car. There is these interior nodes here, which might just be for strengthening. And then this one, as you can see, what weld does, I'm pretty sure this is weld, is they're still movable. They still have their own collision, but they can't be removed from the car. And then we have... that's a different car. Then we have weld, merge all fixtures, which just makes them all one thing and all connected to the car. Then if we go here with both, one overrides the other, and we can't rip them off. We will just quickly spawn in a new version of the merge, just to check if I am correct. Yes, merge is the one that can't have any fixtures ripped off. So that is very cool to know. So I highly recommend you select weld all fixtures when exporting to have the best experience. If you're on a bit of a lower end computer, then do merge all fixtures, as it will decrease the amount of nodes there are and thus the amount of calculations that need to be made. What we will do though is we'll check the weights of all of these. So we'll just make this one the merge weld again, and we'll do a Control-Shift-N, wait for that to disappear. 1387.06, 1387.06, 1387.06, and then this one's probably going to be slightly heavier because it's got the engine in it still. Yeah, 1389.06, because it still visually has the engine and thus all the nodes for it. So it does not change the weight, which is good, because you cannot gain an unfair advantage by doing so. But what it also means is that potentially you can, because these all have the same fixtures, meaning these nodes, they all have to have weight. So if we go here, they're only lightweight, but using mirrors, you can now, once again, create a ballast in just automation by using a bunch of mirrors. If you paint them invisible, however, they will not be exported at all. I will test if this works for nodes or if it's just the model itself, but that is something to note. If you paint something invisible, there will be no mesh for it, meaning that painting something invisible will improve your performance by not having it there. This goes for the engine, which, with the new 2-barrel carbs, which have 20,000 tries each, will certainly improve performance by painting those invisible. Now onto the suspension segment of this video. The new things we have are the ability to change the toe inside of automation. We will be testing whether this actually works in beamng.drive. So what we'll do is we'll test both extremes. We'll test with maximum toe in on the rear and maximum toe out on the front, which appears to be 1.5 degrees. And as you can see, it's not done anything to the graph, but if I change it to have a max amount of toe out on the rear, we should have a severe amount of oversteer. There we go, it's a bit slow to update, but here we are. Yeah, severe amounts of oversteer. So it does change the graph, so theoretically it should make a difference in beamng.drive, but we will test that in a moment. We are going to go over a couple extra things that aren't big enough to have their own segment, so we will just zero this out real quick. Extra things to note are, with front longitudinal, you can now have torsion beam rear suspension, which is useful because we can now make more accurate vehicles, such as there have been, in the past, there have been Boxer 4 front-wheel drive longitudinal Alfa Romeos. I don't know if they use torsion beam in the rear or not, but it does mean it's possible to make more unique vehicles. Another thing that has been added, which is not big enough for its own segment, is we now have race interiors, which are a solid 50 kilos lighter than basic interiors, at least in this configuration. So that's a solid 10 kilos per seat. So it's not a lot, but it is still very much an improvement. Another new feature that doesn't have enough content to make up a segment of its own is new tires. But we've not been given any. They've not included the new race tires that we were promised. My best guess is that they are still working on the beamng side of things, so the exporter. I believe they're probably still working on more accurate information for tire grip calculations and all of that, and that's why we have not received any of the new tire options such as slicks, wet weather slicks, etc. And finally, with the moving of the test track to its own separate tab, this is mainly important for build-in races and any sort of competition that has an aero score attached to it. In order to find your aerodynamic numbers, you're going to want to go into statistics. By default, you'll be in design. What you're going to want to do is just click on performance, and that's the stuff that would show at the bottom of the test track screen. It's now moved into its own area. Onto the in-beam suspension testing. All the difference between these two cars is, one is toe in all the way front and rear, that being this Chromatic Schnitzel car here, and one being toe out all the way, being the no texture mobile right here. One thing to note is, in automation, this was not no texture, meaning that you do have to worry about naming when it comes to your actual custom textures themselves. What I believe the cause to be is capitalization in the file name for the PNG used for this texture, as it has a capitalization in the name, whereas this over here does not. So that is something to note, that if you have capitalization in your file name, to remove it, and therefore it should work. That's the only discernible difference I can find between the two files, because they both only 3-color files, so that should not make a difference between the colors from at least this test here. Enough of that anyway, we have the toe. So as you can see, I am not touching any controls, only the mouse at the moment. So we have 1.05 toe on the front and 1.6 toe on the rear, as well as we have these camber numbers here. So this is the toe in. A more positive number means more toe in, a more negative number means more toe out, I believe. We can see this visually. That appears, yes, it has more toe in. So in automation, if you want more toe in, more positive. So it does export correctly. And as you can see over here, this has 0.6 toe on the front and 1.6 toe on the rear. How the heck is there a cat in my room? This is the second time it's happened where she just magically materializes. She has no way of getting into my room. She must hide under my bed or something. I'll deal with that in a moment. So as you can see, more toe seems to export on the front for toe in than it does for toe out. But it does export, which is excellent news, as it means we no longer have to export toe. Sorry, we no longer have to tune toe in beamng.drive, which is just superb. Honestly, best update for build and races so far. Obviously, the best update will probably be when superchargers come out, or the, I guess, inevitable automation 2, as there's just so many things that they've learnt whilst making automation that I just don't see them not making a sequel to it, because the amount of things that they would want to do but can't do because of things that they'd have to change fundamentally is a lot, such as new engines as well. So I'm hoping that they do make a sequel. With how promising Engine Simulator is looking, just from the latest video alone, with how simple it is so far, it's not even anywhere near complete. With the sounds it's already making, I think a combination between Engine Sim doing the sounds and automation will be absolutely unstoppable. And with that, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you all next time. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Join my Discord down in the description, and you can submit your own cars for me to review at a later date. Please do subscribe, as I'll be doing a Q&A at 250 subscribers. It will be on both Discord and on YouTube. We are only 2 subscribers away at the time of recording this. Thank you ever so much for watching, and goodbye.